Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Ibby reps NJ. They're the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? Is real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part, where we are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week on Wednesday at 5:30 or thereabouts, coming to you live at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here this week. A little bit late, couple things we had to clean up, but we are ready to rock. John Saponaro coming to all of you from Burbank, California, where it is still daytime. But if it's 5:45 back on the East Coast, my co-host, Matt Ibanez, that means you were born in the darkness.
Hey, I was molded by it too. Yeah, it is pitch black over here in Jersey at 5:45. Usually around 5 o'clock, it's getting really dark. But I'm doing well, John. Thank you for asking, as always. And it's always an exciting time every Wednesday. I know the room's going to fill up quick. There's a lot to talk about because the rumors are going to keep on coming in. There's a big happening this week when it comes to certain meetings with a certain player, with, I'm sure, ridiculous dollar amounts being tossed about by multiple teams. We got 69 people in here so far, and it is climbing, and I expect the number to get up pretty high. Nice. I'm expecting it to get even higher because everyone is just frothing at the mouth for something to talk about. They want to get their feelings out there. There's a lot to cover, and our Mets are going to be in the thick of it for this entire offseason. So let's get into it. Let's have some fun. Let's get into it. Yeah, it is a little depressing. I guess technically I didn't ask you how you were doing, which is my bad. Okay. But I do want to know. I always want to know how you're doing. It's brutal, man. Like, look, I don't want to bog down the conversation with this, but yeah, I have an extra 3 hours to play with, when we record, because it's just earlier where I live, but it still gets dark at the same time relative to where I'm at. So, at 5 p.m., it's already dark. You got to take the dog out for a walk. It's like pitch black outside. It's so depressing to be in this mode. It just is. Like, I hate it, dude. I hate that it gets dark so early. I woke up on I think it was on Saturday, and it was like just a real dreary day. I opened the window and I just look out there, and I was like, well, today's weather just looks like seasonal depression. Like, that's pretty much what it was. And it is what it is. It's that time of year, but let's not break it down too much. There's a lot. I don't want to bring it down. Positive to talk about when it comes to it. We already cracked over to 100 people. So shout out to all of you. Make sure you like and sub to the channel. Like the video. Subscribe. We just crossed 860 subs. We're on our way to 900 and hopefully on our way to 1,000, as I will be giving away a signed Edwin Diaz baseball. So again, personal collection. Willing to give it away. Once we hit 1,000, 860 on our way. Let's get into it. Let's have some fun. Absolutely. And right as you were saying it, Darren said like and subscribe to Til Mets Do Us Part. A couple of people sharing that sentiment. Shout out to everybody in the chat who is here so far. And again, of course, you don't have to engage in the chat either with your fellow Mets fans or with us, but it is something that has become a massive part of the show, and we welcome it, whether or not you feel comfortable, because maybe you're a first-time viewer and you're like, hey, I don't want to jump into the chat. Hey, this is a very supportive chat. It's a very supportive show, especially in the offseason. We like to hear from all of you. Everybody loves to play GM. We're going to say it all offseason long. It's fun for me. It's fun for Ibby. It's been fun for us before we ever knew each other, before we ever had this show. It's always something that we've liked to do. A lot of you who are fans love to do more of the same. So we want to hear the input. We want to hear where you're going to go, because look,
let's be honest, there's a lot. The Mets now live in a world with Steve Cohen and David Stearns where they're going to be in the mix. And we're going to talk about, all the rumors and stuff, but there's different ways to go. Do you like Corbin Burns? Do you like Blake Snell? Do you want them to spend all the money on Juan Soto? Would you prefer if they spread money around more? Although I think those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but there's a lot of conversations that we can have. So shout out to Darren, shout out to Charlie. We got Douglas Barnes, Armand, as I just kind of cruise through. Jeff Cohen in the house. A lot of familiar faces. We got Brad. We got Rosie. So many folks here. So looking forward to talking to all of you. Looking forward to talking to Ibby. Looking forward to talking about some New York Mets baseball. Ibby, I don't know where you want to start because we could dive right in to the Juan Soto stuff. Juan Soto sweepstakes has officially begun. Mets are going to meet with Juan Soto, or I guess they met with Juan Soto today or whatever the case may be, but it's going to happen. It's happening as we speak. We could talk about some of the rumors past with Willy Adames and some of that other stuff. We could talk about, we can go in a few different directions here. So where do you want to start? I'll leave it up to you. I'll throw the ball right in your court.
We got 200 plus people in here with us right now, John, and I say we start where everyone wants us to start. I think we talk about Juan Soto and we talk about the meetings that are going on. I know usually you would try to build to something like that, but I think you got 200 plus people. It's going to keep on climbing. This is what they want to hear. This is what they want to talk about. This is the focus of the entire offseason for not only our Mets, but for a lot of baseball, because let's be honest here, until this gets decided, and I think it will get decided within the next 3 to 4 weeks, until this gets decided, not much else is going to be happening. So I think this is what we got to talk about.
I agree. Look, even Brad says just waiting for the Soto Mets pod. Like, people are patiently waiting for something to give because look, we don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea. I don't, you don't. I'm confident Soto is going to take the most money. Now, whether or not the Mets make the highest offer, I think they will. But whether or not that number is then allowed to be matched by the Yankees and the Yankees match it and he goes back, maybe that happens. Maybe we have a Yamamoto situation. I don't know. But I think the Mets are firmly in this. One of our last shows of the season during the playoffs, I said something to the effect of, I thought it was 65% and climbing that Juan Soto was going to go back to the Bronx because he was making it impossible for them to not re-sign him the way that he was playing all season, the way that he played in the postseason, the fact that they made it to the World Series. Ibby, I put those numbers back down to, I think it's 50-50 Mets-Yankees because I just think after everything happened, this is a guy who's already won a World Series with the Nationals. This is a guy who has always talked about the importance of getting paid. This is a guy who bet on himself and turned down whatever it was, $445 million or whatever. He's going to take the money. And I think the Mets are going to put the money on the table that he is going to have to either A, refuse, or B, go back to the Yankees, and then the Yankees will have to match it, in which case he might have to come back to the Mets, hat in hand, and say, all right, I'll take it. Which I know if we're talking about, all right, I'll take your $620 million contract or whatever, is nothing to scoff at. But the Mets are as in this as anybody else. He's the right player at the right time. And I'm curious to see where it's going to go, but I would say I'm about as confident as you can be with a free agent situation right now. I'm not saying the Mets are going to get him. I'm just saying they are poised to get him. I think there's not a lot standing in their way because they have the most money.
I think that I know people I've talked to, and whether it's inside of our Mets chat or whatever, maybe I come across as overly confident with the entire thing, but I am, and I'm very confident, and there's a reason for it. It's because when you look at not only the money situation, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I was on Ant's show over the weekend on Sunday, and he had asked something similar when it came to contracts and money and Yamamoto and getting turned down, matching, not being able to go higher. I understood that with Yamamoto because I think that was all about comfort, location, travel, Ohtani. Like it was just culturally, it was a different thing where I said to you on the show, the Mets got to offer at least $50 million more than the Dodgers. And they did that, and it forced the Dodgers' hand to match. And then he got that number. He said, okay, thanks. This is more than enough. I'm going to go play over. That's where I wanted to go the entire time. They gave me what I wanted. Thank you. I don't think that that's going to be the case with Soto. I think this will be, what is your offer? Give us the whole dog and pony show. Give me the whole thing. What is it? And then you get to the end, and then you say, okay, we're going to offer you $625 million over 14 years. And then he goes to the Yankees, and the Yanks say, what did the Mets offer? And it's like, well, they offered me 14 years for 625. And then they're going to say, okay, we match that. I don't think he's just going to say, okay, thanks. Because if you're willing to go to that number or even start without even hesitating, saying we're going to start at over $600 million, it shows that you're willing to go higher. I don't think that Scott Boras is going to let him to just say, okay, we're good. No, this is going to be a back and forth game because this is, if you're, again, I always look at everything in totality. So when I see someone that was 22, 23 years old turning down $440 million, which is unheard of for someone at that age, to granted, a lot of that was deferrals. You're not going to settle and stop at a number. I said on Ann's show, and I'll repeat it here, the number or the limit, to all my Mean Girls fans out there, the limit doesn't exist. Okay. This number, it doesn't matter. Fans can talk about whatever they want and what have you, but the number doesn't exist for this simple reason. The Mets have always been viewed as second class, and that's going to continue until they start winning and winning at a healthy clip when you're living in the same town as the Yanks. But this is the first time, in my opinion, that the Mets have an opportunity to grab the city and grab the sport by the throat and not let go and actually get something. And this isn't so much about me hating on the Yankees. That's not what this is. This is more so looking at it and saying, you have a chance to show that you're not a joke. You have it because this isn't like you signing away a 32-year-old guy to a 10-year deal. That's not what this is. This is a 26-year-old Hall of Famer, all-round hitter that if the Yankees didn't have last year, they're not in the World Series. Because when you look at the Yankees and what they have, and this isn't me attacking, this is me just speaking facts. The Yankees without Juan Soto were a team that did not make the playoffs. The Yankees with Juan Soto make the playoffs. Now, the reason why this is so big for the Mets in terms of perception, not only within New York, but within baseball, if you take away Juan Soto from the Yankees, not only does it make your team better, but from the Yankee standpoint, it's not being in the playoffs to getting Soto to then making the World Series to then getting embarrassed in the World Series by the Dodgers to then losing Juan Soto to the crosstown Mets to then saying, where do we go from here? So it puts the Mets on a different stratosphere, not only within the city, but in overall, the overall perception amongst a lot of people. And I just think that that is something that goes beyond the game. And I think this is something that the Mets and Steve Cohen are looking at. And that's why I say that the number or the limit doesn't exist, because I don't think you can put a price on that. Not for when this team has been battling for so long for, maybe supremacy is not the word, but just battling for its rightful place in the city.
Yeah, I think the Mets have an opportunity to really put a dagger in the LOL Mets. We talked about at the end of the season last year, or just a couple weeks ago at this point, the end of this past season where, the Mets beat the Braves in Atlanta. They had to do that. The Mets had to get through the Phillies. The Mets had to get through the team that David Stearns built in Milwaukee. The Mets, would have had to go through, as it turns out, the Dodgers and the Yankees. And what a way to complete the story that would have been and take care of all family business. They came up a little bit short, but they have gone well on their way to squashing LOL Mets. And now they're on the precipice of doing it. Another way that they can do that is to buy a player, a franchise player, a 26-year-old in the prime of his career who's going to the Hall of Fame. Get him away from the Yankees. Do it. Put your stamp on this offseason. Let the world know that you have arrived. Let the world know that the Apple Card has been upset. Everybody thinks he's going to go back. Why would he choose the Mets over the Yankees? I just had a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and the guy was like, "We're still the Yankees." I said, "Well, that and $700 million will get you Juan Soto." But you think Juan Soto cares? He doesn't care. He cares about money, man. Because his first initial comment was, "We gave him the best season of his life." There's no way to prove that. You're not Juan Soto. You're not his friend. You have no idea what his life is like. So great. If we can just make up stuff, well, terrific. And then the second part of that statement was outside of the World Series that he won. Oh, outside. Just outside of the World Series he won. The ultimate goal in the sport. Outside of that, getting embarrassed by the Dodgers was a close second. Yeah, I'm so sure. So the reason why I feel confident, and look, I'm going to bring up this comment first from Rosie saying, Will Salmon predicted Soto going back to the Yankees. That made me very sad. I love Will Salmon. He's been on this show like 3 times. I think he's the best person on the Mets beat, hands down. The only person that I think has more clout than him in baseball as it relates to the Mets is the man himself, Jeff Passan. Yes. Will Salmon is very well connected. That is his prediction. That is his thought. It is too soon to tell. And I think the reason why I feel the way that I do is twofold. I think you hit on one, and I'll just take it a little bit further. When I look at the Yankees and the way that they're currently set up, I'm not sure that they are going to match a max offer from the Mets. That's the first part. Agreed. The second part, you already touched on. Look, Yamamoto had suitors, but Yamamoto had a clear preference. Yamamoto had leverage, but his leverage was also at a peak. He got to a point where he's a guy who's never thrown a pitch in the major leagues. So when you couple the leverage that had a ceiling with his preference to be on the West Coast and play with Ohtani, him taking the offer back to the Dodgers and that being it was a great point from you. He also, I'm sure he has a good agent. His agent is Joel Wolf. I'm sure he's very good. He's Kodai Senga's agent, and he may represent a ton of people from Japan. I'm not familiar with his Rolodex, but he doesn't have Scott Boras. And do you think that for 1 second, Scott Boras is not going to say, okay, Juan, you got everything you wanted from the Yankees. Let's just see. Let's just see how badly Steve Cohen wants you. I know you said that you would give the Yankees the last opportunity, but maybe the Mets are the place that really has the last opportunity. You think Steve Cohen's going to be outbid? I don't think so. Let's go back. They offered you $650. The Yankees matched the $650 or whatever, $625. Let's say $625. Now you turn around and you go back to Cohen and you say, Yankees match the offer. You don't think Cohen's going to go, all right, fine, $650. Eventually, this will go to a point that the Steinbrenners are not willing to go. I think the Mets are all in. I do. And so I just think that it's set up. It's positioned for Cohen to spend the money. And I say what I said last week. The Mets have so much money coming off the books. The Mets have, realistically, one big contract. They have Lindor. I know that, Brandon Nimmo has a big-ish contract. I know that Edwin Diaz has a massive contract for a closer. They're not these huge deals. The Yankees are paying $300 million to Aaron Judge. They're paying $300 million to Giancarlo Stanton. They're paying $300 million to Garrett Cole. You think they have the stomach for $650 for Juan Soto?
I don't.
And
And it's not, again, I see that, I see Dave's in the chat. I know Dave's a Yankee fan, and it's not so much me, trying to shit on the Yanks here. It's just more so, like I said before, following the tea leaves. And it's when you listen to Hal talk, and again, I don't watch the Yankees on the regular, but I hear things and I follow things within baseball. And when he talks about contracts and what's sustainable and what is not, and the fact that it got to a point where he needed to basically fly out last year or put in a call to close the deal with a Yankee in Aaron Judge. Like, if it was getting to that point, I'm just like, I have a hard time seeing this team doubling in contract size and offer to another player. Like it's unheard of territory, which is why I said when the Mets start talking, they're going to open at $600 million just to put pressure on everybody else, because that's an unheard of number to start at.
Right.
So I think that, and another thing I wanted to throw out there real quick was also a point that you brought up before, which was, is it proper to spend this amount of money for any team on a singular player, or should you spread the money? I'm going to say what I said to somebody at work today who's a Yankee fan. And I said, because he was talking about like spreading money or what have you for multiple players. And I said, well, the Mets could do that too. And I go, but here's the thing. And this is why I'm against it. I understand it in concept, but I also say you want to sign, say, 2 players that could equal the amount that you might get Soto for, right? But let's say that those players are 30, 31 years old. So really you're paying for a prime from those players for maybe, let's say on the high end, 3 to 4 more years. So you're trying to work within a window with those players based on the money that you're spending, and you're giving yourself a 3 to 4 year window to try to win. When really, if you sign Juan Soto, yes, it's more money. Yes, it's one player, but you're also opening up your entire window to compete that much more. You're opening, I would say, at least an 8-year window, because I think he still has 8 years left of a legit prime. You're giving him more than 8 years, but you're opening a serious window to compete. And you have to do that. And I say that as a Met fan, you have to do that. And you have to go well beyond what you need to, because you're competing with the Dodgers for the next decade. You're competing with the Braves for the next decade. You're competing with the Phillies because they're going to be, they're a little bit older, but they're still going to be spending X amount of money to stay relevant. But really, it's the Dodgers and Braves that are a young, well-oiled machine. You need to have stars in your lineup. You have to have legit players. And it all comes down to the specific player. And the specific player here is 26. He's an all-star. He's a superstar. This is what you want. It makes sense to go for a guy like this. This makes more sense, in my opinion, than giving $300 million or $500 million total between 2 older players. This seems like better money spent, in my opinion.
Yeah, I also think for some of the similarities and differences, or rather for some of the differences, there are a lot of similarities to the Yamamoto negotiations. We already pointed out the differences. The similarities are, look at the Mets and how they handled, look at David Stearns and how he handled Yamamoto. He put Yamamoto on a pedestal. They offered him the richest deal, period. After that, they pivoted, and then they set limits on other guys and other things and other opportunities. But as far as they were concerned, within the market that Yamamoto was going to get paid $300 million plus, there was no limit. They made the highest offer. And I think that's how they're going to operate with Juan Soto. There is not a limit. I said it on this show last week. I said it on the Shea and Sons offshoot show. Shout out to Keith and Key, by the way, for doing that uncomfortable conversation show last Friday. It was a lot of fun. I think they're doing a part 2 this Friday. Should be dope. But I said it then, and I will say it again, that the Mets almost don't need to worry about Soto's contract. It's like his contract becomes irrelevant because it's his contract and then everybody else's. They are so locked into the concept of giving this guy who is 26 years old a massive deal that they feel he is worth, that it's not going to affect the other things that they're going to do. If they have to pivot, obviously they will pivot with more money because they will have not spent, let's just say, $650 million on Soto. But that doesn't mean they're going to let the $650 burn a hole in their pocket. They're not going to invest $650 million across the roster in one offseason. They're going to pay Juan Soto, or they're going to try to pay Juan Soto, and then they're still going to go and fill the other holes that they have. And so that's why I don't think that this stuff is super relevant, Ivy, because like I said, they're going to pay Soto, and then they're still going to try to go get Snell. or try to go get Burns, or try to go trade for Crochet. And they're still going to try to bring back Pete Alonso. And if they can't bring back Pete Alonso, maybe they pivot and they go get Willy Adames. And if they can't get Willy Adames, maybe they go and they trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and then they pay one of the pitchers instead of trading for Crochet. The Mets are still going to make these moves because they have to fill out the roster. They have a lot of free agents. They have a window that is wide open right now. The GM, the manager, the owner have all talked about this run was great. Getting to the NLCS is great, but we don't take it for granted. We have to get back and we have to get better. They've already said that. So this is not a position where, oh, you know what? We didn't pay Juan Soto because he went back to the Yankees. We're going to spend $650 million in one offseason, spread it around everywhere. No, they have money set aside for a once-in-a-lifetime kind of free agent. They're going to try to pay him, and then they're going to go and pay other people anyway. And so that's why I think that the money is largely irrelevant, because it's a massive amount of money. Yes, it is going to shape the franchise for the future if they get him. Yes, but I think they've just already earmarked that money. Remember, to Cohen, this is not that much money. When you spread it out over 14 years, the guy is already worth $21 billion. The $600 million spread out over 14 years is not going to mean that the Mets are going to then pivot and not sign players that they need to sign to be competitive. They understand that this is a lightning in a bottle moment. Go get this player and then surround this player with great players in the lineup so that you can compete with the likes of the Dodgers and the Braves, who ain't going anywhere, and the Phillies, who their window might be closing, but right now it's still very much open.
Yeah, and I just think that, you know, it's a once in a lifetime chance. And I don't think that this team, coming off of the year that they did, is going to let it get through their fingertips. And I said to Ant, and I'll repeat it here as well, this isn't about, and a lot of people think it's about, oh my God, you got to do X, Y, and Z because you got to make it back to the NLCS and the World Series this year. I was like, it's not that. Yes, you want to do that, but that is way too short term. We all want those things. You want the sustainability, but this is about the big picture and what you're going to do as a franchise for the next 5 years, for the next 7 years, for the next 10 years. It's laying these things out. And this is the proper move to do that. And like you said, they're not going to stop. And I know everyone's going to, and this might sound like I'm going against the things I've been saying on this show since day one, where I've said you can't have a $30 million player at every position. But in this case, that is not what it's going to be. It is not. And also, the biggest thing that you sell to a player is, yes, we think that you batting behind Francisco Lindor is a huge thing for this city, for this team, for us to better our chances of winning a championship. Mm-hmm. The same thing that the Yankees could say of, you're batting behind Aaron Judge. But then the continued point is, well, what's after that? And I think that if the
DJ LeMahieu,
and that exactly, and that's why I say if the Yanks pony up and pay.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but based on everything I just said, with regards to the Mets' willingness to pay Soto and then maybe pay Pete, and if it's not Pete, it's Adames, and if it's not Adames, it'll be somebody else, and then it's also acknowledging they're probably going to bring back Sean Manaea, or at least they're going to try like hell within reason. They're going to go get another starting pitcher, whether it's Snell, whether it's Burns, whatever. The Mets are going to do that. I have every confidence in the world. You just talked about selling point. If the Yankees sign Juan Soto, who else are they going to sign?
That's the big thing. If they spend that
Where
much
are they going to
money,
put these players?
you're basically at that point banking on guys that haven't proven anything yet. You're hoping Jason Dominguez takes the next step. You hope that you call up Spencer Jones and he provides. You're hoping that Anthony Volpe doesn't go through the peaks and valleys that he did this year. You're probably not bringing Glaber back. Like, there's a lot of question marks. You're probably not bringing Verdugo back. There's a lot of question marks within that line. And if that team, based off of how they said how they're going to spend money, if they drop that much, they're not going to be able to fill in that team. Whereas for the Mets, they could say, hey, if we get you back and we still plan on attacking Pete, could you imagine having a lineup that is Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Mark Vientos, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Alvarez as your top 6 building blocks moving forward? That, I think, is very tantalizing for a player, on top of the fact that we're going to give you the most money.
You could argue, obviously people are going to say Ohtani and Trout and whatever. Right now, today, November 13th, you could argue, Ibby, that Juan Soto and Aaron Judge are the 2 best players in the sport, or at least the 2 best offensive players in the sport, right? So pairing them together again and for the long haul is enticing. But like you said, then what? Because this year, it was enough to get into the playoffs. It was enough to make it to the World Series, albeit in a softer road. You still have to get there. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Yankees, but they didn't have to play a powerhouse team until they did, and then they lost, and they lost bad. Is that lineup, is that team enough? Probably not, most times. I don't think it's enough against the Dodgers, that's clear. I don't think it's enough against the Braves. I don't think it's enough against the Phillies. Not when the Phillies are firing on all cylinders, not if the Braves are healthy. So the confidence that I have in the Mets being able to build out their team bigger and offer that in 1, in-house options that are there already, and 2 other players that they could bring in. Again, they signed Soto. You're the Yankees, you signed Soto. You just said they're not going to bring back Verdugo, and they shouldn't. Are they going to sign Soto and Santander? No. They're not going to bring Gleyber Torres back, and they probably shouldn't. Are they going to sign Soto and Willy Adames? No. Are they going to sign Soto and Alex Bregman?
No.
Are they going to sign Soto and Pete Alonso?
No.
Okay. Could the Mets, I'm not saying I want them to do this. Could the Mets sign Soto and Pete Alonso?
They could, yes.
Could the Mets sign Soto and Santander?
They could if they wanted to.
Could they sign Soto and Willy Adames?
They could if they wanted to.
Could they sign Soto and Alex Bregman?
They could if they wanted to.
I rest my case.
It's all about, and this is why it sucks for the Yanks. It's all about capitalizing on the opportunities that you had based off of when you spent said money. I would think that the Yanks, probably in their heads, would have thought that they would have won a World Series by this point since they did the Garrett Cole contract. Okay. And it hasn't happened yet. And now you question what he's going to be able to provide for you for the next 4 years at $144 million plus. So it just seems like, and I've said this term a lot, it just comes across as a very top heavy team. Now, look, they could easily, it's the New York Yankees. Like, they are the brand in sports. They could easily keep him. They could, 1,000%. And if George Steinbrenner was still there, I would say that he is not going anywhere. But Hal is not George. And he never has been. He runs it differently. It's a business. It's not it doesn't come across as a love and a passion like it did for George.
It's certainly not a win at all costs.
No, it is not. It is more so I'm going to spend big on one thing and hope that it works. And then if it doesn't, I'm going to backtrack, do some other smaller things. But here's the thing. I don't see him doing back-to-back years of super huge contracts. And one, like I said, is doubling that of Judge. I don't see it. And if I'm wrong, I will eat all the crow.
Sure.
I will eat all of it. But I don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening, and I'm going to jump into the comments because there's been a lot of really good ones, and Ibby and I have just kind of been, doing our thing, so we've been ignoring you guys, but I'm going to get to a lot of them now. I'll start with, honestly, one of the most recent ones I highlighted, which is from Mr. Nobody. I don't see him doing it, Ibby, but also what I said before, the Yankees have a lot of work to do. It's not appealing. And not only is it not appealing from the Soto perspective, it's not, I would argue, it is not prudent for the Yankees to sign this deal. It is going to hamstring them in other ways. They're not going to add to Soto and Judge. And Soto and Judge are great. They're great together. They were great together this year. And it still wasn't enough. It is not enough. It is not going to be enough. The Yankees don't have a first baseman. They don't have a second baseman. They barely have a third baseman. They have a young shortstop. They don't have a left fielder. They kind of sort of have a catcher.
Yeah.
Where are you going with this team? Who's leading off? DJ LeMahieu and then Soto and then Judge, and then who's hitting fourth? You? And then me?
Okay.
Like, where are we go? Like, there's not they shouldn't. They should, like, if this was not a guy that they already had on their roster this year that took them to a World Series, I would argue that the Yankees wouldn't even be involved because it's not prudent the way their franchise is right now.
The reason why they have to be, and I know, I believe me, I think that they could do a lot of wonders if they chose to actually spend $600+ million to fill out other areas of their team. I think it would help them. I think they can get better defensively. I think they can fill out the roster a lot better. But here's the problem. It's the perception. And you can say, and Yankee fans and the Yanks could deny it all they want, but here's the truth, like I was alluding to before. This is a team that didn't make the playoffs, that goes out and gives up 5+ prospects to bring in Juan Soto to then fall short in the World Series. It almost worked. But here's the thing. You gave up 5 prospects. You gave up Michael King, who had a fantastic fucking year in San Diego. You could use a pitcher like that. Now, granted, you got Juan Soto in that, and you nearly won a championship. So I'm not faulting you because you have to give to get still. But the thing is this. If they lose, like, this is why it's so hard for them and why they're in a tough spot. If they lose those 5 prospects to then only get 10 months of Juan Soto to have him then go across town to the Mets, it makes everything. It makes a lot of people question what the hell exactly is going on in the Bronx. Like, I think that's the biggest thing because you've given out large contracts and it's going to come back to bite you. And it really comes back to also the way that Hal has nickel and dimed. And look, people can deny all they want. They can deny this all they want. But let's be real here. Bryce Harper should have been a New York Yankee.
100%.
Bryce Harper was going to be a New York Yankee. It made all the sense in the world. But Hal, I don't care what anyone says, Hal got out a year in advance and dealt for someone that he thought was going to be cheaper on a large contract in Giancarlo Stanton. And he figured, this takes me away from the Harper talks. I got the guy. It's probably going to be cheaper. Harper's going to cost way too much. And what ended up happening? The market said F you to Harper and Machado, like I said it had, which I still don't understand why it did, but it said F you to both of them, even though they were 26. And the Phils make out like bandits because they got Harper at what? Maybe an extra $40 million or whatever the total contract was in comparison to what Stanton is getting paid. So that's just, again, nickel and diming. And I just don't see that working here. It's not going to happen. Like, their backs against the wall. They're going to try. Mm-hmm. They're going to try their damnedest. But I just think that Steve Cohen is going to just keep applying that pressure as he should. This is a shape-shifting chance.
I totally agree. Let's jump into these comments in earnest. I said that we were going to do it a moment ago, but I do want to shout out everybody right now. Stevie Mac saying, if I were Cohen, I'd put my cojones right on the table and start negotiations with 12,650 right off the bat.
I agree.
I think the years will be higher, but I think the number will be lower. So I think he's right in the ballpark. Yeah, if you want to be ballsy, you want to jump out and you're like, hey, you know what? Boom. Here's an offer. Turn this one down. Here's $650 million. You're going to walk away. I think that's a great point. Just go out there. Don't dick around. Just be about it. Armand says, Rodon, DJ, Stroman, and Stanton contracts are going to make the Yankees pass on paying Soto $600+ million. They have bad contracts, period. I'm not saying that some of those guys are bad players. I think Stanton gets a bad rep. I know he doesn't play as often. I know that he, was traded there when he was like 29 years old and immediately became 39 years old. I'm not sure how that happened. I'm not sure what time warp he traveled through, what wormhole from Miami to New York on the way. But yes, it's a big deal. All of those are big deals, and they're not necessarily good deals for what they're getting from the players, even if the players are productive. Rosie says, I don't think the Yankees have the same appeal they once had. The Dodgers are the Yankees of the 90s. That is accurate, 100% accurate. In the modern baseball landscape, the Dodgers have the appeal. The Yankees still have a lot of they're still the Yankees. This is not me hating on them. It's just calling it for what it is. I live out in LA. I see it. It was so weird and shitty to see that idiot who hosts, late night on WFAN, who's a big time Yankee fan, look at a picture of the Dodger parade where it was a sea of humanity where you could not see down the street and be like, at our parade, when the Yankees win one, you're not going to be able to see for several blocks. Like, what? Dude, you just lost to them and the place was packed. Trust me, the Dodgers have plenty of appeal. You had mentioned Dave earlier. I'm sure he's the individual here with the Chop Sports media handle. Welcome back to Dave. He said the Yankees, he was talking a little bit of smack and joking around, but then he says the Yankees are not going to match. And he says Cohen is going to be that spoiled teen. He's not going to lose in a bidding war. It's going to be about preference. I think there's part of that that's pretty fair. I think it's going to make it, the preference part is a little is where I would disagree. But I think that I think the Mets are going to make it impossible for him to have another preference. Like you said before, this is a spot where a guy, as Chris said here, because Yamid came into the comments, and shout out to Yamid, we haven't seen him in a while, saying how it's not always about the money. It's about setting an example.
Everything burns. But then Chris comes in saying how Soto turned down $450 at the time when he would have been the highest paid player, and he turned that down. It's all about the money. I talk about when he was at a younger age. And I'm telling you, if a player has made it about the money to this point, and for all intents and purposes, it's been about money since Jump Street, wants to be that guiding light for the players after him, wants to set the tone, okay? If that's the case, you're going to force him to turn down and leave legitimate money on the table. You're going to force him to leave $60 to $75 million on the table.
When was the last time Scott Boras left money on the table?
He does not leave money on the table.
Okay. Just checking.
No man in their right mind would leave that type of money on the table. For Judge, it was a different story because he didn't want to leave. He just wanted the extra year. He never wanted to go anywhere. He wanted to stay. And then they gave him the year and he stays. This is different. I understand people can say that Juan Soto looks like he fits as a Yankee. It makes sense. The history standpoint, the type of player that he is, it could be incredible. All these things. And in a different lifetime, I would agree with you. In a different lifetime, in a different multiverse where they didn't have this many contracts, I would agree wholeheartedly with you. And to be honest, if the Yanks really wanted to, they could do exactly what Steve Cohen is going to try to do. They could, but until they do it, I do not believe it. And I cannot allow others to talk as though it is commonplace because it hasn't been for nearly a decade.
Yeah, and look, again, I'm not dumping on the Yankees when I say this. I'm trying to just keep it honest from a standpoint of what they've shown us to be recently, the Yankees, and how teams in those positions operate to build a team and how the Yankees have operated to build a team. Ibby, if the shoe was on the other foot, if the Yankees, and I'm not even saying that the Mets have these superstar prospects, oh my God, the best farm system. No. If the Yankees had the Mets' current payroll situation and the Yankees had the current contracts and the Yankees had the current prospect depth that the Mets had, I would say there is almost no chance that Juan Soto becomes a Met. Because the Yankees would be incentivized to spend the money on Juan Soto. What I said before is the difference. When you look at the Yankees' ability to sign Soto plus, it's not there. The Mets' ability to sign Soto plus, whether you agree or disagree with the direction or the individual player, it's all right in front of them. So it's not me being a homer. It's me just reading the tea leaves. Jumping back into the comments here. Again, a lot of good ones. And we haven't had the opportunity to, really dive into them the way that we wanted to. Rosie saying the Yankees have a roster construction issue, which is exactly what I'm talking about. Armand saying, actually, I want to save that one for later on. Brad just agreeing, saying players like Soto don't come around often. That's a understatement of the century. And we agree fully and completely. Douglas with a good one saying there is no salary cap. Cohen is exactly what Soto wants, and vice versa. Soto is exactly what Cohen wants. This one from Yamid, you also mentioned hasn't been around in a while, but welcome back. The richest owners are the Dodgers, who are owned by a group worth $320 billion. That is true, but Ibby, I will say this. There is a difference between being one guy who can decide that he wants to write a check and a group that needs to decide it. Now, we have not seen the Dodgers not sign a player that they want. So obviously this has been a non-factor as far as the Dodgers are concerned to this point. My point is, and I brought this up on the Uncomfortable Conversation show, and I've brought it up on this show in the past. Steve Cohen had the advantage when he bought the Mets because the Wilpons, remember the deal fell through, and yet Steve Cohen came back around, made it all the way through the extensive search process, because at the end of the day, the Wilpons were like, the franchise is worth $2.5 billion. And A-Rod and J-Lo, they're worth a few $100 million, but they needed people to make it happen. And this other group needed people to make it happen. Steve Cohen said, how much? Here's the check. Say no. Here's the check. Say no. Straight cash, homie. And he can do it again. He did it to buy the franchise. He can do it. It doesn't matter. There is no committee. If Steve Cohen gets a little drunk in Hawaii and wants to sign Carlos Correa, he can. No one can tell him no.
The only thing, and this is why the Dodgers are so smart. Yes, we want our owners that are full of, their pockets are overflowing with cash. We want them to spend and put out the best product on the field. But there is still playing within the lines to an extent because, yes, it does hurt your team in terms of development when it comes to, draft picks and compensation and all that type of stuff. So you still want to be able to play within those lines, and you want to play that up and down. We'll go over the tax. We'll come down for the year. So this is the game that you play, which is why I've been saying I feel like Soto has been on the mind of this franchise for the last 2 or 3 years, which is why they spent the way that they did and what about the contracts the way that they did, shorter term, high AAV, get it out of here. And then into the future, we only have X amount of contracts to truly worry about. And that's really, it's Lindor and Nimmo because, Diaz was a 5-year deal, but the other ones were, larger in length. So it's really like 2 big contracts on the books. You have room to spread things out and make this, possible to play this up and down game with the tax. You can have a high payroll, but still play within the lines and not take too much of a hit when it comes to what you can get back in terms of draft pick, what you can get back in terms of qualifying offers when they go somewhere else, what have you. You still want to be smart. That's what makes the Dodgers the model. That's why Steve Cohen said, this is what I want to aspire to be. And that's why David Stearns says, I'm not focused on the Dodge model. I'm focused on making the Met model, which is going to be something along those same lines. But he's taking ownership and saying it's going to be our way. We're going to do things the Met way, and it's going to be proper and right. And that's why all of this still can be attained by signing a player the magnitude of Juan Soto at such a high clip in terms of overall and a high clip in terms of the AAV.
Absolutely. Speaking of the AAV, before we head into the break, I don't know if this is how it's going to play out, but Ibby, the other benefit that the Mets have right now, because you just laid out the way the payroll is, the way the contracts are set up, the way the Mets are poised. If an incentive, if a deal breaker can be made, the Mets could pay Juan Soto with no deferrals. And I'm not sure how many other franchises can do that right now.
I've been on, I think I said it on Ant's show, and I think I might have said it on here too. I said that when it comes to this contract, I'm expecting minimal deferrals. Minimal. Like, I really don't think it's going to be driven based off of that. And if it is, the only reason it is to potentially put him over this. If we get into the sevens, if that ends up happening, that's the only way that deferrals come into play. But I don't think it's going to get there. I think it's going to be more so we're going to put as much money and as much real money into your pocket now, right now, as opposed to putting things into the future and beyond. If he wants something in particular in deferrals for a certain time later on, when he doesn't plan on living in New York and he's going to live somewhere else and, not worry about taxes or what have you, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. But
if he
really think it's going to be more so everything is going to be upfront.
If he wants deferrals, he'll get the deferrals. My point is that the Mets do not have to operate.
They don't have to
deferrals as a point. They don't have to give him deferrals to make the contract work. The Mets could give him $650 million over 14 years straight up. And if you do the math, 650, what is that? 650 divided by 14 is 46 and a half, whatever. So it'll probably be a little bit more than that because it'll be probably more like it'll probably be more like 48 or 50, I think, in that kind of range. But the Mets can pay him $48 million annually in today's value money. They can.
They could.
They can just do that. And if he doesn't want the deferrals, he ain't getting the deferrals. Before we head into the break, good point out by Armand. I forgot Jazz Chisholm is still on the Yankees. He said he'll be their second baseman, or maybe he'll be their left fielder, or maybe he'll be their third baseman. Jazz Chisholm will factor into the Yankees in some way, shape, or form. I just kind of he escaped me, but yes, he is definitely a player that factors into the Yankees in a major way. Armand saying Lindor, Nimmo, and Diaz all have deferrals. It helps the Mets not have to put deferrals into Soto's contract. I agree there as well. Ibby, at 50 minutes, a little bit over what we usually do at the halfway mark. So I think now's a good time to head into the break. If you are watching live, and there are quite a few of you, 782 in total right now, according to the ticker. What up to everybody? It's probably a lot of new faces mixed into that. If you are new to the show, welcome. If you have been watching the show for a long time, welcome back. But specifically for those new folks, if you're just tuning in and you're like, wait, this is great, I don't want to sit through a break, don't worry. It is just a quick 30-second reset and an ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So do not go anywhere. We will be right back in just 30 seconds. If you want to take this 30 seconds, though, to either like and retweet the episode on Twitter and follow us on Twitter at Til Mets Do Us Part, please go ahead and do that. You should certainly take this opportunity, if you're watching on YouTube, to like the video and subscribe to the channel, which will get you automatically entered to win an autographed Edwin Diaz baseball that Ibby has in his hands right now. We're giving that away once we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We are getting close, but we are inching along. So if you want to switch over from Twitter to YouTube and subscribe, that's something you could also do during the break. But we will be right back. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We'll see you guys in just about 30 seconds. Yo, just like that, we are back with Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday. We are usually with you for about an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes, something like that, especially in the offseason, because the conversations really get rolling, and it's hard to stay a little bit more concise in all of our conversations along the way, while also getting your questions, your comments, your concerns, taking the conversation, taking the dialogue into a place where maybe we didn't even expect. That's the beauty of the live chat. But we are here. We are powered by the Brella Sports Network. Shout out to John Minconi for making it possible. And like I said before, you can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on Twitter. Being a part of the live show is really the best way to interact with the show because everything comes in real time. The questions, the comments, the concerns, we can get to it. The chat themselves, they can all address it. The best way to make sure that you're doing that is to subscribe and turn notifications on so that you never miss the opportunity to know that we are live. But if you miss any part of the show, this lives on that same YouTube channel forever. You can go back, you can listen to whatever you missed. And if you can't do any of that, this drops as an audio podcast. You can take us with you on the bus, on the train, on your way to work, on your run, at the gym, wherever you're going. You can take us with you in your pocket in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. Ibby, quick word before we get back into the conversation from our friends at Independent Safes.
Of course, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent Safes is protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes. Fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependenceSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And I think that if you're talking about $600+ million, $700+ million, upfront deferrals, bonuses, whatever.
Escalators,
it doesn't
options,
matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, odds are you could use some protection when it comes to that amount of cash. And our friends over at Independent Safes can hook it up. Juan, I know you're watching. I know you're a big fan of the show. Love to have you. So just so you know, head on over to Independent Safes after you sign that big contract so you can be able to stash all that cash away for you. We're not throwing this one in the river. We're going to keep this one in the house and open it when we need some of that cash. IndependenceSafes.com. Tell them Til Mets sent you. They'll hook you up.
Jump back into the comments really quick. Darren saying the Dodgers have an ownership worth $332 billion, yet they paid Ohtani in deferrals. Armand following it up by saying Ohtani wanted the deferrals and offered that to every team that he talked to. You have to remember, Ibby, the chat, everybody, Ohtani makes, I think it's something like $70 million a year, something stupid in endorsements. Yes. The next closest player, it's like 50 or 70. It's an astronomical amount of money right now. The next closest baseball player is Aaron Judge, and he makes $6 million. So whether it's 50 or 70 or somewhere in between, the next closest player is not even in double digits. So Ohtani was in such a unique position to be able to accept the deferrals because of the dollar amount that he makes outside of his baseball contract. That's why the real dollar number in real time is different from the actual, 10 years, $700 million contract or whatever that he signed. No player, Soto, Judge, Bryce Harper, the next great player that's going to get a contract after Soto at 26 years old, no one else has that bargaining chip in their back pocket. Shohei Ohtani, in that regard, Ibby, I know they call him a unicorn on the field, is truly a unicorn. So you have to throw that out of the window because it's not going to matter for a very long time, maybe never again, in terms of baseball bargaining chips and, endorsement deals and money that somebody is getting outside of their contract.
Absolutely. I'm just, I know we were on the Soto talk. I want to just add something real quick because I am seeing that something was posted. It's an older tweet, but it was put into our Mets chat, and I wanted to just repeat it, talking about Juan Soto and connections, and people like to draw things from what have you. And obviously the connection, even though we know that Cohen's out there with Stearns and Lindor, and everyone's talking about that, but let's not forget that Starling Marte. Everyone wants Starling Marte out of town, but Starling Marte has a nice connection with Juan Soto as well. An old tweet was just pulled up saying how Juan Soto has known Starling Marte, who was his main supporter among players. He's known him well before he even got to the majors. They worked out with a certain person for X amount of years, so they've known each other for a long time. So again, it's all about making people comfortable. It's all about money. It's all about, offering the best to a certain player, and that is another potential feather in the cap for our New York Mets.
Yeah, Ibby, I'm just thinking about the Mets roster as currently constructed. is, hey, Carson, welcome to the show.
You did.
I sent the tweet. I'm part of the show. He did it. Thank you. Ibby, no, if I think about, and not that this is the be all end all, but just something that, has been important. And I don't know Juan Soto, so I don't know if this is important to him, but has been important to players in the past. Soto is Dominican. And I believe that right now on the Mets roster, Starling Marte is the only other Dominican born player, correct?
I would have to look at the entire thing, but off the top of my head, I believe so.
People in the chat, you can fact check me if I'm wrong, but I know Alvarez is from Venezuela, right?
Yes.
And obviously Lindor is from Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Vientos is from
Connecticut,
Miami, Connecticut, but he is Puerto Rican. He's of Puerto Rican descent, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't think of another, because there was a time when the Mets, had a lot of Dominican players on their roster,
mm-hmm.
And I think right now it's just odd to see that there aren't really many. And I don't know if it's a factor. I don't know if Soto cares. I don't know if anybody cares, but he might. And right now that's just, that's something that would matter. And again, right now in this moment, obviously they can add, they have a lot of free agents, they can move things around. But I think Marte is the only person on the roster, unless I'm forgetting about somebody, who is a fellow countryman of Juan Soto. Again, I don't know if it's a factor. But it's just it's worth mentioning because it has been a factor in other players' free agencies in the past. I do want to jump back into the comments here. This one I kind of brought up by accident earlier from Armand, but as we kind of transition the conversation away from Soto into the rest of free agency, says, how many big contracts for free agency do you believe the Mets will do? I think they'll do 2 big contracts. Ibby, what do you think?
Depends on what categorizes as big. Like, what does that mean? Like that's my opening question. Like, yes, Soto is an unheard of contract that I think that they will, offer, do, and I think, in my opinion, ultimately succeed in. So that's, let's say, $650 million. What else could they do? I still think that Pete is an option, and I don't even think, again, I don't think Pete's getting that much. I know we differ a little bit on that in terms of total money, but I've said before, I'll say it again, I think after this year, with the numbers that he put up, I think you're looking at 125, maybe 130. That's where I am. Others disagree, but that's where I'm gonna hold on that one until proven otherwise, until someone really pays up. I don't think that they will for the first baseman. So is that considered a big contract? Because if it is, then yes, I think that's possible. And then, after that, I still think that they're going to be involved with a top flight pitcher. So I'll say 2, but really, I'm thinking 3 big contracts. I do.
I think it's 3 as well, because I think it's Soto and another offensive player, whether that player is Pete or Willy Adames or whoever else it might be. And then I think you have to say 3, Ibby, because there's no guarantee of a trade. I think the Mets would like to sign 2 offensive players. Let's just say it's Soto and Pete. I think they'd like to sign those 2 guys, and maybe they do want to trade for Garrett Crochet. Maybe that's really what they would love to do. But you cannot guarantee that a trade happens, because you don't know, 1, what the other team is looking for. 2, you don't know if your willingness to give up is going to match their willingness to want, right? Like, they just may want too many things. And you also don't know if maybe you match up well against them, but maybe there's another team that matches up even better and has better prospects. So to me, while I think the Mets would like to play in the trade market, and maybe they inevitably will, and maybe that'll get that big contract thing down to 2 again, I just don't know if today you can bank on it, because trades are just, they're harder to predict, right? Nobody's going to go, oh my God, like it's a slam dunk, the Mets go out and execute this trade for this player. So, I don't know. I would say it's 3, because I just think it's always easier to deal in money and try to forecast money. I do want to jump back into the comments. Thank you to the folks for grabbing some of this. Armand saying Nunez, Brazaban, and Ronnie Mauricio are from the DR. Ronnie is not guaranteed. Ronnie, I knew. I wasn't thinking of him as a person who's going to be on the team necessarily, so that was out of sight, out of mind. I did not know where Brazaban was from because honestly, we just traded for him, and he wasn't really good, and he wasn't really around that often, so I forgot. And I did not know where Nunez is from, so thank you for that. Charlie mentioning some of those same people and saying Severino. Again, I knew about Severino, but there's no guarantee that Severino will be on the team. And Carson saying Alex Ramirez, who is on the 40-man, also fair. But again, like Ronnie Mauricio, I'm just not considering guys who aren't really on the team. Like if Severino had a 2-year contract, yes, it would be Severino, right? Like if he was going to be on the team. So Brazaban for sure. And Nunez, those are 2 good ones that I did not think of because honestly, I just did not know where either one of those guys were from. So thank you for keeping me honest as far as that's concerned. Yeah, I just think that the Mets are living in this world where they are going to need to spend on a minimum of 2 people. I just think that that's how it's going to be.
Yes, minimum is definitely 2.
And more, but I don't know if those contracts are going to be considered big, right? Like if the Mets sign Alonso and Soto and then also sign Sean Manaea for $70 million, like do you consider $70 million to be big? I don't know.
No, I think
not
also,
really, right?
I think from what Armand said in the chat, he was thinking, $100+ million is considered a large contract. And that's considered a large contract. So yeah, I would say it's 2, definitely bordering 3, depending on how they want to go about allocating. But I think, I definitely think it's definitely 2. I would lock in 2 for sure, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's 3.
I agree because I just see a world again where they can't trade for the pitcher they want, and they spend whatever on Soto, whatever on Pete or Adames or somebody, and then give Blake Snell $120 million. And that would constitute by his definition as a big deal.
Yeah.
So I could see it playing out that way potentially. Let's talk a little bit about the, I know it's old news kind of now. What was your thoughts on the Willy Adames stuff?
Well, first of all, I shouted you guys out on the Subway to Shea podcast with Ant on Sunday. And I thought you and Keith and Hector and David and Edge, I thought you guys did a great job on the Uncomfortable Conversations over on the Shea and Sons channel. And you did a great job talking about this. And it comes down to who you can trust and listening to the right people. And, we always say, wait for salmon or wait for the passing bomb. So when I heard it, I was like, when I saw contract numbers, I was like, that's not real. I don't believe that at all. It's way too early. This isn't proper. It was right off of Stern saying what he said at the meetings. It's like, no, this doesn't smell right. I don't believe this at all. But when it comes to a phone call, checking in with a top flight hitter, like that doesn't shock me. And the point that I made to Ant on Sunday was, when you think about it, if the Mets show interest, and let's say the Mets ultimately did sign Willy Adames to play third base, that tanks the Pete market to a point where you could even say that you could still get Pete because it would bring everything down so much. Because if you remove the Mets from the Alonso talks and bidding, if you will, other teams aren't going to spend as much. So the Mets could sweep back in. So I think that the Adames talk is really more so to curtail the Pete market to an extent. But I do think that there is a connection between Stearns and Adames. I think Adames is a damn good ball player. I think it is a risky proposition from a defensive standpoint when Stearns is very much adamant about having a strong defense. So if you can't just say, Adames third base, Vientos first base. It's like, well, Vientos is still trying to learn third base. Now we're going to put him over at first base. And Adames has never played third base. He's always been a shortstop with limited time at second. So It's like we're putting a lot of things in different spots and hoping that there's not an explosion. So it's like I think he's a good ball player. If he was on my team, I'd root like hell for him because he seems like he's got that dog in him. Like that's a guy I can definitely root for. He's a damn good hitter. He's done wonders since he's gone to Milwaukee. So I can understand why Stearns, coming from Milwaukee, would have a conversation with him. Do I think it fits? I think it's a curious fit. Would I hate it? No. But I think it was more so a phone call just to be like, hey, what's up? That's it.
Yeah, I hate to repeat myself, and there were a lot of good folks who overlap with us and with Shea and Sons who are in this chat right now that were there for the uncomfortable conversations where I put out a lot of my feelings on this when it was still very fresh at the end of last week. So for those of you who were there and are now here, first of all, I thank you for tuning in to wherever we do our thing. But I apologize for repeating myself, but Ibby wasn't there for all of it. So just to give him the benefit, and also give the other people who are in the chat, and now there's almost 900 of you, the benefit. Let me just go back and share a little bit of some of those same opinions. First and foremost, I don't believe it because I don't believe that they got to a point where they would have exchanged numbers on free agency. David Stearns basically said it as much when John Heyman asked him the question. He's like, dude, we're in like hour number 4 of free agency. We're not that far with anything. And so why would he jump out and offer, even if it's a player that he chooses to covet, he's not going to jump out and make an offer the likes of that to Willy Adames when everybody knows that the jewel of the offseason is Juan Soto. Now, I'm not saying that GMs don't operate, spinning multiple plates at the same time. Of course they do. But he's not the guy that you jump out and get when you have your own in-house player in Pete Alonso, who, by the way, is a better offensive player than Willy Adames. And I like Willy Adames, but Pete is better. You don't jump out and go sign him and signal to everybody that you're moving on from Pete, including Pete. You don't go out and sign him when you're really focused on Juan Soto, unless Juan Soto has said, I need to play with Willy Adames, which I doubt happened, again, with respect to him as a player. You also don't go out, and to Carson's point and yours from earlier, Adames has played 0 MLB innings at third base. Doesn't sound like Stearns to put an inexperienced hand at a defensive premium position while also paying him to be a both sides of the ball type player. Is he athletic enough to do it? Sure. Do I think that means he's going to be a good third baseman? Well, there's no evidence to suggest that he would be. So I think that's foolhardy. The other part of it is, I know a lot of people think, and there's some advanced metrics on it that say that Mark Vientos is not a great third baseman. Mark Vientos has made great strides, better than I would have ever thought, you would have ever thought, anybody would have ever thought at third base. He's 24 years old. With another offseason working with Lindor, he can get better. Do I think he'll be a Gold Glove third baseman? Probably not. But he's got a killer arm. He makes a lot of plays, sterling, sparkling plays. And I think that sometimes you have to reward a player for the work they've done. And the guy has not done anything that shows me that he should not be the Mets third baseman. I also think you put undue pressure on Vientos saying, hey, everything you did last year was great. Now, real quick, go do it again. Go learn first base. Also, while you're learning first base, go replace Alonso, who has been a terrific Met, and also go replace Alonso's numbers in part because now we don't have Alonso. Right now, I know in a scenario you might have Juan Soto. Mm-hmm. So you have Juan Soto and you have Willy Adames, but Willy Adames does not replace Pete Alonso. He does not hit 35 to 45 and drive in 90 to 100 plus. He doesn't do that. He's not that kind of player. So now you're asking Vientos, and I think Vientos can do it. Look, he projected out to hit like 40 home runs if he played the whole season. Yeah. But it's a lot to ask him to do. It's unfair to ask him to do. And if Pete signs with the Cubs and the Mets sign Juan Soto and the Mets then go and sign Willy Adames out of necessity, I'm not going to be upset because I think he's a good player. But I think with all of that being the backdrop, to jump out and do that essentially before free agency has even started, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for Stearns. It doesn't make sense for the market. It doesn't make sense for Vientos. It doesn't make sense for Alonso. And it doesn't make sense for Juan Soto. So to me, he's a good player. I will root for him if he's on the team. I trust David Stearns and his evaluation of talent. But I just don't think it makes any sense to jump out and do it, which is essentially what the report was, because the report said, oh, there's a contract offer on the table. There's no way there's a contract offer on the table.
No, that's why once I saw all of that, I became very hesitant of it. But Plus, Brad, a different Brad coming in here saying how plus we don't know if Adames can play well in New York. That's another thing as well.
It's another reason why we don't know if to jump out and do it when you have Pete and Soto sitting there who have both performed to the highest level in New York.
And what we've been saying is we want guys that not only want to play in New York, but have shown that they can play in New York. So that definitely and that's something that Stearns has said before as well. He said it last year during the offseason. He wanted to have guys that know how to play in New York. It's definitely a fact. So yeah, that's definitely something that would weigh in on something like this, because you're talking about a player who played in Tampa Bay and Milwaukee, not exactly the pressure cooker that is New York.
Yeah, and this is another good one from Carson. He says Adames is going to market himself as a shortstop. The only thing that would convince him to go to third base, you'll have to pay him more. Adames is not worth the previous Correa to third base sacrifice. I agree there. Also, I agree that Correa, again, having played third base in like the World Baseball Classic and stuff, Correa is also a better player, or at least was a better player at the time of his free agency than Adames is right now. And I think paying him and trying to convince him to switch positions and stuff like that is, to Carson's point, not something you should do, not something you need to do. Also, Ibby, the Dodgers need a shortstop.
They do.
Doesn't Willy Adames going to LA and playing for the Dodgers at shortstop just make so much sense? They will pay him. They need him. Why would he go and play a different position for the Mets when he can go play shortstop for the Dodgers? To Carson's point, unless you're going to pay him more, and he ain't worth overpaying to move positions. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And like you said, there's too many people within the market that make sense for him in terms of staying at shortstop. It's the Dodgers. The Dodgers have been on the tip of the tongue for a lot of people since last year, trying to attain through trade. The Giants I know the Giants are cutting money, or so they say, but they're trying to trade people as well. They have a need at shortstop. They have a need for righty power as well. Adames makes a lot of sense there. So there are people out there. If this was a shortstop market that just didn't exist, you might have, a better argument. But because there are shortstop needy teams, I think he's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And this is another one from Mike. I believe, is it Steele? I think it's Steele, last name. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mike, please go ahead and let me know if I'm saying it right, because I would like to get your name right. But saying Adames could hit 212, and he's saying, I want no part of Adames. And this is something that I also brought up on the Uncomfortable Conversation show, Ibby, which is Adames is like a career 248 hitter. And I know we don't put a lot of stake in batting average.
Yeah.
But just comparing him again to jumping out, signing him instead of bringing back Pete, which would kind of be the signal. Well, Alonso is like a career 250 hitter, 248, 250, 245, somewhere in that same ballpark. But he hits more home runs and he drives in more runs. So if it's just offense, wouldn't you want to just pay Pete? Because Pete is not playing a premium defensive position, so you don't have to pay him for that. Pete is not a premium defender, although I think he is above average in some of the things he does. So you're not paying him for that. You're not paying him to switch positions. And to a lot of other people's points, he already can perform in New York because he's succeeded. And now off of this down year, he's had some lack of success in New York. So why would you turn around and legacy? So why would you turn around and sign a guy who's also a career 248 hitter, who you're going to have to incentivize to switch positions and then hope he can switch positions, who's already not as good of an offensive player as the guy who you can just re-sign for probably less money anyway. And if it's not less money, it's going to be very close money, right? Like I know the contract thought was 160, I think. And I still said Pete maybe can get 170, 175. I mean, I think Pete is worth 15 million more than Willy Adames if it came down to that. And from Armand, Pete is a career 249 hitter, Adames career 248. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
No, I don't think. Again, if you're asking me to pick between the two, I think that he would go the route of Pete. But like we've said before, whatever David Stearns ultimately chooses to do, like we're doing a lot of talking today. we're going to do a lot of talking this entire offseason. And until stuff actually starts happening, what we think might not jive with what David Stearns is thinking, what the front office is thinking. And if that's the case, so be it. I have all the trust in the world in these, in the people that are making these decisions. And of course, shout out to the 934 of you that are with us right now. Hopefully, all Mets fans, hopefully you feel the same way that we do in terms of trusting David Stearns. And we're not going to, fly off the handle when one thing happens. Guys, let's allow things to, play out properly and not react the way that we normally do. But we're Mets fans, and I'm sure that's not going to be the case.
Well, it's true. I mean, we're talking about this, and again, everybody likes to play GM. I said that in the open. We've always acknowledged that. You and I are no different. We are fans first. We have this platform, but we're fans. And so we are going to give you our opinions on what's being talked about. But both of us, Ibby and myself, have been on record a million times over saying #trust David Stearns. So if Stearns were to make this Adames move that I don't like, that's me with my GM hat on. Me with my fan hat, I have no reason to not trust David Stearns. So while I disagree with it, I'll still be like, okay, you know what? Okay, I'll go with it. Ibby, this is a good one before we pose another question from the chat. Armand just says, Adames is most likely looking at 6 to 8 years, and I'll pass on that. Yeah, if Adames was this guy who was, a lot better and then coming off of a bit of a down year, and you could stopgap him with a 1 or 2 year deal and ask him to move positions and build value and stuff like that, I would be interested. I might be interested in oh, hey, why don't we sign Willy Adames and trade Jeff McNeil, and Adames could play second base. We got him on a 1 year deal. We'll see what's up. And we'll go there. If you're giving him a 6 to 8 year deal, that's insane. And you know what, Ken? You've sold me. Never mind. He said Salicata loves Adames. Enough said. Yeah, hard pass. Hard pass, brother. Until Salicata gets a pair of glasses that fit his head, I don't want to hear anything. The blood circulation.
Ken, is this your first time here? I haven't laughed that hard in a while, so thank you. I appreciate that one.
That's a good one. Shout out to Ken.
Shout out to you, Ken. Thank you for coming in with some fire right there. I appreciate it.
You know what, Ibby? Sometimes all the baseball logic in the world goes out the effing window when you just sit there and you go, oh, Sal Licata likes this. I don't like it.
I don't like it.
Full stop. I'm done.
I don't like it.
Here's a good question from Mr. Nobody. What are we doing about center field, though?
Center field, in my opinion, really comes down to how you allocate the rest of the offseason. So if you're going to sign Juan Soto, if you're going to sign, Pete Alonso, if you're going to attack the starting pitching market, if you're going to dabble in the reliever market, to me, I think right now, center field is a platoon job. I think Tyrone Taylor is going to be out there, and you could opt to sign someone that is a glove type, or you could just trust in Taylor to be okay by the time spring rolls around, moving forward after the hernia surgery, and say that you're going to split time. And when you're not playing, you're going to be, placating to that of a potentially Drew Gilbert or Jet Williams or Luis Angel Acuna. And that's what we're going to roll with. And I think that I'm okay with that as long as you attack and settle this team properly in other areas. Mm-hmm. Now, the one problem that you have is, if you're going to have an outfield, and this David Stearns we're talking about, if you're going to have an outfield that's going to have Brandon Nimmo in left, and let's say Juan Soto in right, you got to have someone that covers ground in center field. So if that's not Tyrone Taylor, and if it's not one of the kids that I just mentioned, well, then that's where you got to go out there and find someone. I don't think they're going to bring back Harrison Bader, but someone of that ilk that can cover ground and act as a fourth outfielder platoon type.
I could see them bringing back Bader at the end of the offseason if he doesn't have a deal. If they, let's say they sign Soto, they sign Pete, they do a lot of the things we've been talking about, the type of stuff that we want, and they kind of don't address center field at all. And we get to late January and he does not have a deal, Harrison Bader. I could see them bringing him back on a 1 year deal for less than what he got last year or something like that. But I don't think that's likely. I think you said a lot of stuff that makes sense. I think Douglas kind of hits it here saying Taylor until Gilbert is ready. I think, Ibby, between Drew Gilbert who was hurt and didn't play a lot, and so that stunted his development at AAA. Jet Williams, who was hurt and didn't play a lot, stunted his development at AAA. And Luis Angel Acuna, who did come up and play mostly shortstop, a little bit of second base, was a spark. Those are three players the Mets have at the AAA level or above, in the case of Acuna, who I think has played himself into at least a role on this team that can all play center field, including Tyrone Taylor, who's going to be on the team. So I think if you sign, let's just say offensively, if you sign Soto and Pete, and your lineup is something like Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Pete, Nimmo, Alvarez, and you're going that kind of deep, there's no reason why Tyrone Taylor, who did a lot of really good things for this team, both offensively and defensively, can't play at least the platoon role, or at the very least, the bulk of center field, splitting it with, let's say, Acuna, splitting it with, let's say, Drew Gilbert, if he has a crazy spring. Like, to me, that's not ridiculous if you're signing both Pete and Soto, right?
No, I get what you're saying. I think ultimately...
Or two players of that caliber that lengthen your lineup is my point.
Yeah, I think ultimately just get someone that can cover ground. Like whatever you have to do to figure out that process, if you're going to allow it to play out during the spring. And again, if you're going to get these bigger end players, it's going to allow you to let someone of that younger stature learn if you want to. But again, it still comes back to what David Stearns wants. He wants run prevention. He wants to make sure he's putting out a defensive lineup that is not going to cost a team games. And people can badmouth defense or not care about defense all they want, but we just watched a World Series where defense and fundamentals played a huge part in it. So it's going to continue to be a focus. So however they choose to do it, I'll trust in Stearns. I think there are some options. I haven't looked deep into center field yet because I've been eyeing other areas of need right now, like right field, like starting pitching, like figuring out what's going to happen with Pete potentially. So I haven't really deep dived into center field. I know Carson's in the comments saying that they are posting a video over on Mets Weekly next week talking about center field options. I'll make sure to check that out, and I'll probably have a better idea by next week. But I really think that defense is going to be a focus, and if they do get those other players, then allowing the young kids to learn on the go.
We just hit 1,001 eyes on us right now, and it's the highest
ever
mark for this show. Yeah. And we just right on cue, we dropped down to 999, which is but it's all good. Guys, we're hitting over 1,000 views. We appreciate each and every single pair of eyes that have been on us for the last hour plus. Thank you. If you're here for the first time, follow us at Til Mets Do Us Part. You can follow us individually at John Sapp Talks, at Poison_Ibby. You can also subscribe to the channel, Til Mets Do Us Part. You can also subscribe to the podcast version of this because sometimes you can't watch and you just want to listen. Well, guess what? We got you covered. This same exact show drops as an audio podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. And right on cue, 1,008 is the number we are at now. It's a new high water mark. And you know what? We're going to celebrate the shit out of that because Ibby and myself have been grinding our asses off to get this show to where it's at over the last couple of years. But we really do appreciate all of you who tune in and watch us do our thing. And again, you're all a big part of it. The comments, we weren't going to talk about center field really at all.
No,
and Mr. Nobody brought up a great comment at a great time. And it sparked not only a conversation between me and Ibby, but in the chat as well. And speaking of the chat, let's jump back into it. Armand says, the D-backs have plenty of outfielders that can play center, like Alex McCarthy could be traded for. Ant Rivera, Subway to Shea, saying maybe you could trade for a center fielder. Armand also saying maybe buy low on Jack Swinsky from the Pirates, something like that. Ibby, I'm inclined to not want to trade for a defensive first center fielder unless you can get one on a steal deal. You know, if you're Stearns and you're like, hey, I love Alex McCarthy, or I love this guy, and I can just kind of, move
something similar to the Tyrone Taylor deal, essentially from last year, where you got Taylor and you got Hauser. Now Hauser didn't work, but you got Taylor out of it. So something along those lines, I could see, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's what I would look to do if you can do a kind of trade like that. But otherwise, Ibby, I'm not super into the concept because the Mets have Tyrone Taylor already, who's a good defensive center fielder. And then they have the 3 prospects that I just mentioned that all profile as good defensive center fielders: Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams, and Luis Angel Acuna. I don't know what level those guys are going to hit at. But again, if you're talking about defense first, they could all go pick it. So I'm not going crazy. Now, what about this, Ibby? What about this one for you? Go crazy and trade for Cedric Mullins. Would you do that?
I mean, did Mullins have a rough year? Didn't he lose?
He had a down year, but so if you could buy low on him being a two-way player, I would investigate that. I would investigate.
Yeah, I would look into it. Why not? I mean, and that's definitely a team that has a plethora of options in the outfield, and they're trying to open up spots for some of those kids because they don't want to trade them. So, when they have guys out there already like, Colton Cowser and Heston Kierstead, and they're trying to find, opportunities to get other guys out there as well. So, yeah, it's definitely a possibility for sure. No doubt.
I would rather take a bigger swing. I don't think Luis Robert Jr. is happening, but just whatever. I would rather take a bigger swing on Luis Robert Jr. or buying low on Cedric Mullins for a guy who could be a two-way player for you in center field and really bolster your team. I'd even be willing to give up more than trading for a guy who's going to be defense first. Because again, I think the Mets have defense first in-house. Armand always dropping in the stats. Mullins hit 234, 16 home runs and a 2.6 WAR.
I'll take that.
Listen,
I'll take that all day.
Out of center field, I will absolutely take that. That is good enough. That is he
absolutely,
even on a down year, in a lineup that could potentially feature Juan Soto and Pete Alonso and Lindor and Nimmo and Vientos and hopefully a bounce back Alvarez. I would trade for and take that from Cedric Mullins in center field. Absolutely.
1,000%. I would take that all day.
I would even give up something of significance. Like I would trade, I don't know who, but like if you were like, oh, would you trade Drew Gilbert in that deal? Like I probably would. I probably would.
Yeah. But again, this is something we'll see how this market materializes over the next handful of weeks to see how this team's going to go about allocating. But I think that there are some interesting ways that this team can go. I do think I'm going to err on the side of the kids getting an opportunity with Taylor, but I am open to the idea of going elsewhere and finding someone else.
Ibby, this one is this is true. You don't believe everything you read, but this is probably going to be true. Aunt Rivera saying the entire coaching staff is back. So I guess I'm not going to be a guest this year. Probably. And
we're going to find out if there's like a change in quality control. Maybe we can have you on and talk about that. Maybe they got some new janitors at the stadium. I don't know. Maybe we could talk about them. Either way, we're going to get you back on the show. No problems, buddy. You're going to be here.
Aunt Rivera, Subway to Shea, great show.
Had a great guest on Sunday. Had a great guest this past Sunday.
It was you. It was you, wasn't it?
Pulled huge numbers for him too. Yeah, it was great.
Ibby is the draw. No, Ant is great. But for those of you who are new to the show, I think there was 2 episodes in a row where Ant was a guest with us after the Mets fired a third base coach or some shit.
He came in for Glenn Sherlock.
Yep.
Glenn Sherlock. And I can't. Oh, who's the other one? I can't remember.
Ant, maybe you'll remember. Ant, if you're still here and you remember, throw it into the chat. Because it's just Sherlock? To me that's hilarious. Sherlock was one for sure. I don't remember who the other one was.
I can't remember the other one. I can't remember. It was a dumb name. I can't remember it. But either way, you're coming back on, Ant. Don't you worry.
Oh, wait. Ant saying, oh, I forgot. The Mets got a new assistant pitching coach.
That's right.
Coordinate my interview. Oh, you know what? Might have to book him next year. Next week.
You're coming on. Yes, Carson. That was it. Sorry.
Gary DiSarcina.
Yes, that was it.
We got Juan, who is new to the chat. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the chat. Wanted to say the fact that Mark Vientos was originally considered last year for a DH. Who's not to say that's still a plan for him? We talked about this a little earlier. I just think that he deserves the right to play third base until he proves that he literally cannot. I think that he has room to grow. He's already grown tremendously. He's already better than I ever thought he would be. And I don't believe in opening up a hole to then put him somewhere else. I also don't like Ibby. I don't like 24-year-old full-time DHs. I don't really love full-time DHs in modern baseball anyway, but if you're going to tell me you get, vintage, 33-year-old Big Papi, I'll take it. You're giving me Edgar Martinez, I'll take it. You're giving me, 25-year-old, which is what he'll be next season. I don't want to make that guy a DH. I think it stunts his growth. I think you'd rather have that guy be a player, an all-around player. I
agree. And like I've said before, it's difficult for a guy to just be a hitter. Some people just have to go through the everyday of running out onto the field and playing a position and just being locked in that way. It's very hard to just be a hitter. It's not, everyone thinks it's so simple and they just want to plug and play in terms of the offensive stats, but it's a different attack for a player. So I'm not sure that everyone is going to take to it like everyone thinks that they will.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, Ibby, we're a little bit over time, but we did not talk about starting pitching that much. There's Roki Sasaki, there's Garrett Crochet, there's Blake Snell, there's Corbin Burns. People have their picks. Obviously, each one comes with their own potential baggage, right? Crochet, a little bit of an upstart. Maybe his best years are in front of them. He was a relief pitcher for a while, hasn't thrown a lot of innings. You'd have to trade to get him. Blake Snell, he doesn't pitch a lot of innings, but when he does pitch, he is a true number one. Corbin Burns, true number one, but a lot of the peripherals suggest that he is on the downturn in terms of stuff, pure stuff. And then you have Sasaki, who is, kind of an unknown, plus there's the posting fee. So we don't have a ton of time to really dive into that because we spent a lot of time on Soto, but what's your thoughts on the pitching market and where the Mets are going to be?
Everyone automatically jumps to Corbin Burns because of the connection with David Stearns, and I can understand it. He fits the bill in terms of front-end starter that this team needs, but I still have my worries, and I have been upfront, and I'll continue being upfront about this one. I'm not very keen on giving him 6, 7, 8 years at the age that he is, when his cutter has been going down in terms of efficiency. He had a resurgence in the second half, but it was like a different style, not what it had been the previous years. His strikeout rate has gone down over the last 3 years. I think it's a little bit concerning when you go from like 225 to 200 to 185. All the other numbers are still pretty solid, but it's still a trend that you have to look out for. And I know people say that strikeout rate isn't everything and strikeouts aren't everything, but it is a strikeout driven league. So I have my worries about Corbin Burns. I'm with you in talking about like when, if you can land a Blake Snell for 3 or 4 years, I think it makes a little bit more sense.
Let me ask you this.
Being safe. Yeah.
We may have talked about this last week. I may have asked you the same exact question because I'm having a weird deja vu right now. But if it took 5 years to sign Snell and 7 years to sign Burns, and trading was off the table, those are the only two options. Snell for 5 or Burns for 7, which is pushing the limits of where you'd want to sign either deal. Which one would you rather sign? You can't trade. You've been pushed back on trades. The price for Crochet is too high. Sasaki goes to the Dodgers or the Padres. You need to bring in a starter. You have signed Mania. Mania's back in the fold. So you have Mania, you have Senga, but you still want to get a top, another ace to add to the top of that rotation. You can only pick from Snell or Burns. Snell's contract is 5 years, full stop, no options, no opt-outs, no nothing. And Burns is 7, full stop, no options, no opt-outs.
Me as the GM, I would probably opt for Snell. I think I would go that route because I really don't think that, me thinking for the Stearns part, I don't think he wants to give that many years to a starter. But in terms
Stevie
of the connections, I don't think, but with the connection also, I know that Burns doesn't walk that many people either. And I know that's a bugaboo for Snell. And that's obviously something that's been a problem for this team. So it's like a tough spot. But from the way you present it to me, if I'm building and how I think I want to spread the money and the years and play things proper and continue to build my own pitching, I would choose to go lesser. So I would probably opt for Snell in that scenario that you gave me.
I would too. And it's purely based on.
And I like Corbin Burns, but I think, that's the way I would go about it.
I would go that same route, and it's purely just because just less. I just want to pay less years. I want to give, pitchers who are in their 30s or about to be 30, I want to give them as few years as humanly possible. So even if I have to hold my nose, because I'm really interested in Snell 3 to 4 years. I'm less interested in Snell on a 5-year deal. But I'm also really interested in Burns on a 3. I shouldn't say really. I'm interested in Burns on a 3 to 4 year deal too. But Burns is not getting a 3 to 4 year deal.
No.
Snell might. And so if you have to sign him to 5, if he's got a 4-year deal out there and you have to give him 5 to get the deal done, I'll hold my nose and do it. I'm not signing Burns to a 7-year deal with that same logic. Let me ask you this though, Ibby. What if, and I don't think this is going to happen because again, I think the high water mark is 6 to 7 for Burns. What if they both can be had on a 5-year deal?
Which one would I choose?
Yes.
Burns.
Okay. So
5 years. Because I said on the show, I said if it was 5 years.
Numbers scare you less even on a 5-year deal.
Yes, because in 5 years, I'll make it work within that window and hope that I can win within that window. I don't like 5, or I don't like 6, 7, 8, literally 7, 8 years that people are trying to talk about. And I said on Ant's show too. I go, I don't see somebody giving that offer. As great as Corbin Burns has been, but seeing where the numbers might be heading, I have a hard time seeing someone giving him $200+ million. I want to see it happen, and I want to see who's going to do it. I really do.
Yeah.
All things considered, both 5 years, I would choose Burns on the 5 years.
I think I agree with you again. I think Burns is a little bit more reliable because he will eat more innings up. S-Man saying talking about Burns, was dominating, didn't give up more than 3 runs until late June. July had a bad August, but a good September. Pitched into the 9th in a postseason start. Yes, but like you said, Ibby, he did it in a different kind of way, and I don't know how much I trust. I think that Snell might be able to adjust better getting older than Burns will.
I think that's definitely debatable. I think in terms of like body and build, I think Burns does have the wherewithal to last. I just don't know if the stuff is going to be there. I've always liked Blake Snell's stuff, but the whole thing is, can he harness it? Which is why he has so many damn walks. And if he didn't have those issues, we wouldn't be talking about Blake Snell because he would have signed a huge deal last offseason, but it didn't happen. So
true. Or we might already have Blake Snell because he might have signed a huge deal with us.
Right. So again, that's why it's a tough overall proposition, but no matter whatever David Stearns decides, if it's one of these guys, I will gladly welcome either one of them to my team.
If you have the time, can we talk quickly about Sasaki and Crochet?
I can talk quickly on them, yes.
Okay. Let's take Sasaki because we don't know exactly what's going to go on with him. He's going to get posted. He's going to have his international market. You got to pay the posting fee. Everything seems to say that he prefers the West Coast because it's quote unquote closer to Japan. Do you think the Mets are a realistic option for Sasaki? Because people are saying if he goes to the East Coast, they put the money on the Mets. I think that's just somebody saying stuff. So I just don't think anybody really knows where he's going to wind up. And I think if the Dodgers want him, they'll get him. If the Padres want him, they'll get him. If the Giants want him, they'll get him. I think that's how it's going to go. So do you think he's even a realistic option? Carson's basically saying no. He says he's a Dodger. Next, move on.
I think that this is really Dodger centric. If you want to talk about chance or opportunity, yes, they're on the list because they have I think they showed good faith with how they treated Yamamoto last year, even though they didn't get him. They established themselves well there. They have Kodai Senga. They've been in the Japanese market before as a franchise, and this is a different owner with more money. So things that you can offer down the road. But this isn't about money. This is about placement. This is about someone who wants to come here knowing that he's not going to make a lot of money. It's the Ohtani route. It's basically saying, I'm going to come here, prove my worth, and then get paid. Otherwise, if it was about money and only about money, this is why the international pool doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter how much money people have in that said pool, because if he cared so much, he would just wait 2 more years, get posted then, and make bank at 25. But he wants to come over now. This is about wanting to get to a place that he wants to feel comfortable with and to grow into. I understand that Japanese players at times don't like being considered the second, or in this case, the third, and they want to be the top guy when it comes to a given place. But so does that take away the fact that he would be behind Ohtani and Yamamoto? I think Yamamoto kind of dispelled that a little bit, but everyone is different. So him going there is easy to say, well, it could be lesser pressure because he's the third guy that goes over. But it could also be, yeah, but those two bring a lot of Japanese media and a lot of question as well in terms of like all superstars going to LA now. So that's going to bring pressure in itself. Does he want that? I still think it's the Dodgers, and then I would put it after that saying the Padres have a great shot with with Yu Darvish and everything there. I think that Seattle has always been strong in that market as well. They would have a shot. Granted, they need offense more so than pitching, but still, this is an opportunity to get a 23-year-old ace. So I would put the Mets 4th or 5th on the list, but I think he's a Dodger. I do.
I do too. Carson saying they've been scouting him since he was in diapers, which isn't very long ago, but still. I tend to agree. I think it's going to be a West Coast thing. I think because he's younger, I think there's less of that, be the man kind of thing that you said. I think it's more like, hey, if I can go there and I can be with these 2 great Japanese pitchers in Ohtani and Yamamoto, and I can learn from them, and look, Senga's a great Japanese pitcher in his own right. And so is Darvish, which Darren just pointed out, it's Sasaki's idol, so I don't think he's going to mind because he's a younger player, not necessarily looking to make bank. Like you said, right out of the gate, he's looking to come here and establish himself. I think Senga's presence on the Mets helps, and it puts the Mets above, maybe say the Yankees right now as far as an East Coast team. But again, you have to get through the Dodgers and everything that they've done and the pitchers that they have and the Japanese influence that they have and the proximity. Then you have to get through the Padres and everything that they've done and the proximity and having Darvish. So I think the Mets are at best 3rd on the list, probably more like 4th. So I don't see it happening. Really quick on Crochet. What are your feelings on Garrett Crochet? He scares me a little bit. I like his stuff, but his background and his lack of innings and stuff worries me in terms of giving up massive prospects to acquire him.
It's understanding. This is why a situation like Crochet really comes down to, in my opinion, the wherewithal of your staff to look at a player, to watch tape and watch film on him to try to get an idea as to why were things the way that they were. Why was he a 4-inning pitcher, but he had a ridiculous K per 9. I think he still had an over 12 K per 9. The stuff is electric. Lefty, 25 years old, and we keep on talking about opportunity at players. You don't get opportunities that often to get a 25-year-old ace or ace-like potential like Crochet has. So I completely understand wanting to be in the market for them. I just don't think that they have. I don't think they have the bullets. I really don't. I know people are afraid of him, but I can see why David Stearns would want Garrett Crochet. Like I said, lefty, electric stuff. Strikeout pitcher, can grow into something like that. Makes all the sense in the world. But
what could he grow into? Do you think he could be Chris Sale? Which would be great. I'm not putting can he be that good? Can he be?
I think it's. I mean, I don't know who to properly
chime in on that too.
I'm not sure how to properly comp him, but I just think that when you have an opportunity to talk, because they're willing to shop him because they want to fill out their team better. So they're trying to get rid of him. And they have other players as well, in terms of starting pitching coming up. But he is definitely someone that's going to be very high in demand from teams that have better farm systems than the Mets. We can talk about the Mets all we want. I like Jet Williams. I like Drew Gilbert. Luis Angel Acuna is what he is. You got Ronnie Mauricio. You got Brandon Sproat. You got all these guys, right? But I'm sorry. If the Red Sox are on the line and they offer just one, if they offer one of Christian Campbell, of Roman Anthony, of Kyle Teal, the Mets don't have a shot. If the Orioles call and say, we're going to offer Sam Basayo or Kobe Mayo, the Mets do not have a shot. If the Dodgers call and say, we're going to offer Zahir Hope and X, Y, and Z, the Mets don't have a shot. If the Braves call and they are, or maybe, I'm not sure about the Braves system at the moment, so I won't include them, but that wouldn't shock me if the Braves
still, I mean, you still already brought up 3 or 4 teams that are going to have better systems than that.
I think they have better systems, and I know
maybe a bigger need, right?
Right, and I think Zach Scott brought it up, and shout out to Carson because he put the tweet, I think, into our chat. He was echoing the things I was saying to Ant as well. It's not so much about the quantity, because yes, the Mets could offer quantity in a trade for Crochet, but other teams can offer legitimate quality in terms of positional studs. Mayo, Basayo, Anthony, Campbell, names like that, they carry much more cachet than what the Mets have.
GSD commenting from Twitter, our first Twitter comment of the day, and I think a first-time commenter saying Woodruff, ? I believe Woodruff has a 2-year deal, right, with Milwaukee. So
1 year now.
But is under contract is what I'm saying. They signed him with the hopes of getting him healthy this year so that he could pitch again next year. So Woodruff would be a reclamation project either way, but yeah, the Brewers kind of jumped out and kept him in-house, tried to get him healthy. We'll see what Woodruff is once he does get back. But great question regardless. Armand saying, I think Crochet can be Snell with less walks. I mean, that would be great. You get a 25-year-old Blake Snell, theoretically, with less walks is very good. Ibby, I want to let you know we have crossed over the 1,100 viewer threshold, 1,108. Shout out to everybody who is joining us. Last guy I want to ask you about very quickly, very, very quickly. Nobody's mentioned Max Fried. Scared at Max Fried? Interested in Max Fried? Would you sign Max? Like, if you signed Max Fried, is Max Fried a slight downgrade in terms of sureness of like a Burns or a Snell? Or is he in the same category as a Burns or a Snell? Or do you look at him as not Mania or Severino, because I think he deserves better than that, but like a slightly better version of that? In terms of with some of the injuries and things that have kind of plagued him.
Yeah, I think I know Shea and Sons and Keith did a great job breaking down Max Fried and talking about his overall stats and his ground ball rate and things of that nature. I fear him from the injury standpoint. I follow a lot of people on X, Twitter, and Bean Eater, Buzz. Yes, Beans, Buzz, I always say his name wrong. The big Braves
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. That's what you're looking
for. His name's escaped me, but he's a fantastic follow.
It's Bean Eater Buzz.
Yes, Bean Eater Buzz. Yes, Bean Eater Buzz is. We always have good back and forth, and whenever I have questions about like what's going on with the Braves, I'm just curious on certain things from baseball. He always gives good perspective, and he did a nice breakdown of Max Fried, and he said that he doesn't expect the Braves to bring him back, and with good reason. He feels like he hasn't been the pitcher that he once was, 2-3 years ago. He thinks it's kind of on the downturn. Still respects him as a ball player, but doesn't think he's going to be worth the money that he ends up getting. So I had my reservations to begin with, and the way you broke it down, I agree with. I think you're looking at like Burns and Snell. Like I put probably Burns is here for career for the most part, and then Snell's here, and then I would go like Fried's here, and then you go into the other names like the Manias and what have you after that. So he's in a tier by himself, but at the same time, and I'm going to clip this if this ends up happening, it screams like an overpay from the Angels.
Oh my God, dude. Really Armand does. Just said the same.
I didn't even see that. Exactly. I did not even see that.
No, you didn't. I could tell because I could tell where you were looking. That is fucking hilarious.
Like it just screams Angels overpay. It really does. Like 5 5,175, like just something ridiculous. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I could see that happening.
I'm like, why don't we ever win? What happened to us? Why don't we win? I think it's another new commenter, Raul. Ibby, the numbers, and people could debate on the numbers and the years. People could debate even on the players, but I don't think this is outlandish as just a template of an offseason. Soto, Christ. Pete, Burns, Tanner, Scott. The reason why I bring it up is because I think the Mets will get a starting pitcher of high-end regard. I think the Mets will get Soto. I think the Mets need to get Soto plus in terms of offense. My preference is bringing Pete back. It always has been. And I think the Mets will play somewhere in the relief market for a high-end guy. So you could debate the years, you could debate the dollars, but Ibby, I think, and you could even debate the players. Like, I'm not super high on Burns, and I don't know that I would go the Tanner Scott route, but I think we talked about it last week. Aunt Rivera has mentioned it. The 2009 Yankees offseason where they get Teixeira, AJ Burnett, and CC Sabathia. I think this is the modern version of that. I think this fits that ilk. So you could debate on certain things, but I don't think this is a bad comment from Jump Street because I think it's the kind of thing we're looking at.
And everyone will say, well, Mets fans are just thinking you're going to buy everyone. You have all this money. You think you're going to get everyone. It's not the case. But I think that it is possible. And I've always been someone that erred on the side of caution when it came to how this team was going to spend money. I didn't expect them to always spend and be top dollar on every player. If the player makes sense, and it makes sense within the window that I was talking about, especially if you were able to sign a Juan Soto, you have a near decade window to operate in. You can attack within that given time frame and spend the money if you expect to be top flight and compete with the likes of, like I said, the Dodgers, Braves, Phillies, Padres, what have you, because the NL is going to be a bandsaw moving forward for the next handful of years. And that's not even talking about what some of the teams on the AL side are starting to do as well if you happen to make it to a World Series. So either way, I expect the Mets to put some serious cash down and pull in some legit ball players this offseason.
And like you said, as far as the Dodgers are concerned, Ibby, they went all in on the Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Tyler Glasnow, like all these people that they have. They will deal with the luxury tax in the day after the Ohtani contract is up 10 years from now, or I guess 9 years from now. I think the Mets, if they get Soto, put themselves in that area where they're like, we're going to go crazy. We can worry about resetting when, after this is all said and done, when Cohen is in his 70s, we can deal with whether or not where we want to be and what kind of team we want to be. But I think if you get Soto, you've kind of put yourself on a time frame where you're like, we have a legitimate 10-year-ish window. And I think that's what the Mets are kind of looking at. And I think that incentivizes them to take this whole conversation full circle to spend more if they get Juan Soto, not less.
Agreed 1,000%. And again, this all starts with the guy that we started this entire conversation with. It's why the number doesn't exist. The limit does not exist. You do everything you can to create this opportunity. I fully believe that it can happen. I believe that it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, am I going to be sad? Yeah, a little bit, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried because I trust, again, David Stearns. But either way, Mets fans, be excited. Be very excited because you are legit in the hunt right now for an all-world player. And it's unheard of to have an opportunity like this. You are in the conversation. And honestly, people won't say it, but you are favored in this conversation. You just got to close the deal.
I agree. Couple comments. Jeff Cohen saying congratulations to Hojo Howard Johnson, who was inducted to the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. Howard Johnson, a guest on this show about a year ago, I think. Shout out to Hojo. Congratulations. Well deserved. Charlie saying RIP Haji to Keith Hernandez's cat. 22 years. It's a very long life. Bless. It's a very beautiful life for a pet. We've all lost pets. We know how painful that can be. Upsetting. So of course, a shout out to Keith Hernandez. I know that's brutal. It sucks. 22 years is a long time to have a pet, but a very full life. So yes, the winter meetings are finally less than a month away. Ibby and I are going to get out of here for the day. But guys, I cannot stress this enough really quick. We do this. There's almost 1,200 people watching live, which is a high watermark for the show. 11:45 on the button. Ibby and I have been doing this show for a couple of years. We've been grinding. We've been pushing. We've been putting out content that we believe in. We've been putting out content that you guys seem to believe in, and we appreciate every single one of you for being here. If you are a returning viewer, thank you. If you are a new viewer, thank you. And go ahead and subscribe to our channel, Til Mets Do Us Part. Hit the like button on the video. Retweet the video if you're watching on the Twitter side. Follow us at Til Mets Do Us Part. But the YouTube side is where you can really fully interact with the show. Ibby says it all the time. And so it'll help the algorithm. It helps us get even more eyes, which helps us get more commenters and more new viewers, which helps us change the dynamic of the show in real time because your comments, your questions, your concerns, we address them, and it's such a part of our show. Plus, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're doing another big giveaway. We've done giveaways in the past, some good stuff. This one, an Edwin Diaz autographed baseball. It is in Ibby's hand. He's got the certificate of authenticity and all that stuff to go along with it. It is from his personal collection. So we want to give it away. Thank you guys for being here. Ibby, what do you got to say?
I got nothing else, John. That was fantastically said. Shout out to 1,145 of you that joined us on our channel today. It means the world. I just think back to when we were doing this and we had 5 people. Shout out to the 5 people that were here with us because they're still rocking with us to this day. And, it means a lot. It really does. And, the fact that our high water mark was about 800 and change a handful of months ago, might have been last offseason, to now hit 1,146. Call it the Juan Soto effect. Either way, shout out to you, Juan, for the old kick in the ass. I really appreciate it. So, really love all of you. Can't thank you enough. Appreciate each and every one of you. We work hard to put out this stuff. We want to keep making it better and better and better. We believe in the dynamic that we have with each other, and it's resonating with people, and it means the world. And we think that, we think we should have more subs or what have you, but either way, it's going to keep growing, and people are going to see us, and it's going to end up, working in the end. I'm very confident in that because I believe in what we are doing here. Let's go Mets. I'm very excited about this offseason, and I'm very pumped up to talk with each and every one of you every single Wednesday at or about around 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. Let's go Mets. Shout out to all of you. Love.
And that's the thing, you guys. We do go live every week. And if you're on the YouTube side, you subscribe, you turn notifications on, you will get that reminder. We'll continue to remind you each and every single week when we're doing the show. Hey, we're here. This is when we're going to be live next week. Hey, if there's a schedule change, we'll let you know. Hey, if we're going to do a show out of nowhere, we'll try our best to let you know on the Twitter and the social media side. But if you just subscribe, you will never, ever, ever miss a chance to tune in live to John and Ibby and Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We will see you all next week, and LFG